Chatting today with my buddy, my battle buddy from way back in QL2 days in 2001, Laurier Chabot. He has got his own mindfulness-based company called freshandrested.com, and we're going to be chatting all about meditation and mindfulness and how we can start quelling that fear response so that we can get a grip of our prefrontal cortexes. So straight from an Afghanistan veteran, learn all about how you can start getting a grip on your meditative practices. And we're actually going to do one in this episode. So stay tuned. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Hard to Kill podcast. I'm sitting down with my buddy, Laurier Chabot. We go way back, literally first day in the military way back, which is pretty wild. Laurier is not only a buddy of mine, he is a Afghanistan veteran. We were on tour together, and now he runs his own business teaching mindfulness and meditation, and has been doing it for the last 4 years. And his website is freshandrested.com. And I wanted to chat with him today because he's got an interesting take on mindfulness and how to get into your flow state. And it's a pleasure to have him on the podcast, and it's awesome to have a buddy on the podcast. This is what I got into podcasting for. I just wanted to have cool conversations in kind of like in a context where we could share them, not just like on our phones and not just amongst our friends, but to use the golden nuggets of information that we typically share amongst ourselves and put it out to the universe. So, hey man, thanks for being on the podcast, man. Really appreciate it.
Dave.
Yeah. Right.
Got a question for me?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was expecting more. That's why I was expecting more. Great. So let's get up and running. Let's start with a little bit of backstory. And why did you decide to get into the psychology space?
So, as Dave mentioned, hey Dave, we joined the military pretty much at the same time. Went on the same tour back in 10, 11. And over there, I got a book while I was in the middle of the desert on top of my T-Labs from David Brownlee. You remember, right?
Browntowns. Send it down. Yeah, of course.
So the book was called The Road Less Traveled, written by a psychiatrist. And while I was reading the book, and the book pertaining mostly to discipline and clarity, as to how one can live one's life, I realized, man, I want to do what this guy is doing. So after coming back from tour, I launched myself into psychology. Went back, did another bachelor's degree, eventually doing a master's degree in counseling psychology. And heading towards the end of the program, I had to choose what I was going to write about in the last paper. And so I was looking at maybe the most complex ways of viewing psychology as maybe branches that I could take and help my clients with. And the two that came to mind were existentialism and mindfulness. And so coming out of the master's program, I decided to delve into mindfulness. And I've taken a number of courses in that. And I've been teaching it for 4 years, as you said. And with clients as well on a daily, regular basis. I work full-time in an employee's assistant program as a counselor. So I'm a Canadian certified counselor.
That's cool. So what's
the side business? The meditation business is kind of like after hours.
Okay, got you. So I was just going to ask, I hear mindfulness a lot. What is the definition of mindfulness?
It's a good question. I think most people, when they think about mindfulness, it's about being in the present. What that could look like. Not being in the future, not being in the past, as to one's thoughts and whatnot. The guy that I kind of consider my guru, he would say that that's part of the definition, right? But let's say if you take a black Labrador, a dog, well, we'd consider them living in the present. But as human beings, we have an extra capacity, right? And that capacity is to reason and to be aware. So mindfulness would be knowing that we're knowing that we're in the present moment. So in comes the term metacognition. Meta, being able to see that we're knowing.
Okay.
And probably
seeing that we're okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to digest that a little bit. Okay, so seeing, so there has to be this awareness in the middle of you being aware, which seems complex. So where do we draw the line now? Like, how do you know you're actually being aware of being aware? Is there a point, or is that the whole point? It's to train yourself to be aware that you're being aware.
Exactly.
Oh, thanks, man. This is a great conversation.
Already. Yeah.
Oh, done. Okay,
fantastic. Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, let's break it down a little bit. So, what is knowledge, right? And knowledge we can see as information gathered through our senses. So, touch, taste, smell, sight. What are we missing here? Hearing, right? And in Buddhist philosophy, they would also include everything that happens in the mind. So there's senses. You can sense what's going on through the mind, whether it's thoughts, emotions, and anything else that's going on inside. So when one meditates, what you're doing is you're cutting off your attachment to the external world and really coming into the internal. So you can start observing your senses a bit more clearly, observing your thoughts a bit more clearly, observing your emotions a bit more clearly. And as you're observing, that's when the metacognition comes in. Most of us, and even those that meditate on a regular basis, are pretty much attached and cannot necessarily detach ourselves from our thoughts or our impulses. And thoughts are quite strong, right? It's like, oh, I want to do this. Okay, do that, right? But as you're meditating, you might notice, oh, I want to do this. Well, you're not going to get up, right? You're just going to observe that thought. As you advance in meditation, what you start to realize is that thoughts are just thoughts. You have a thought of your mother. It's not your mother. It's a thought about your mother, and it carries no more weight than that.
So then what is meditation, mindfulness and mindfulness meditation? What's the difference between the two? Am I being mindful if I'm meditating? And if I'm meditating, am I being mindful? Or am I missing something there?
Yeah, I guess it's a good question, right? Because there's varying types of meditation, I guess you could say. Okay. And so maybe yogic meditation, or I don't know, prayer can be considered meditation as well. For a lot of people, going to the gym is a form of meditation. And generally, I think what defines meditation is focusing on something. Okay, so you're focusing, you feel like you're in a meditative state. When your focus is a bit erratic, that's when you don't feel meditative.
That makes a lot of sense.
So, yeah. So mindfulness goes, I'd say, a step further. You're noticing that you're focusing. You're focusing on your focus. So you can notice where your thoughts are going and notice what comes next.
That's cool. So mindfulness is a level up from meditation, and meditation, if I understand correctly, like I think one of the reasons why I do like going to the gym is I'm just focused on what I'm doing at the gym. I have my phone. I know I put the same songs on every time, so that's kind of ritualistic. And I have the routine that I've set now for 6 weeks. I know it. I go in, I do it, and then I'm done. And I feel good that I've accomplished something. But there's a moment where I just carve out the day where I'm not working, I'm not thinking about the kids, I'm not worried about things. I'm just more or less there. So that would be essentially a meditative practice.
A meditative practice, yeah.
Interesting.
The capacity to focus, right? And just like if you were a sniper, right? You don't want to be paying attention to several things. You want to have your focus so you achieve your target. You said something earlier that mindfulness isn't meditation. Mindfulness is a meditative practice in its own, right?
Okay.
It's just slightly different. So let's go a step further for everybody that's listening, including yourself. Let's say you're at the gym, right? And you're focusing, and that's great. It's like, okay, I'm going to do one more rep, right? I know, let's push for 5 more, whatever. So what's cool about that is that there's kind of like a coach self that's coming into play with maybe a more vulnerable self. It's like, come on, let's do it, right? But what if you had the coach of the coach noticing the thoughts that are controlling the body?
Okay. All right.
Right. And noticing also the varying emotions that are present, not only in the coach, right, which might stem from a place of, I don't know, anger or frustration. You know, sometimes we have kind of like these models that we use in order to bring in kind of like adult or parental self. And then noticing the emotions of the child self that are showing up as I don't know, you're doing the push-ups. Like, I don't want to do one more. You notice that thought, and then so there's a noticing of noticing that's going on.
Huh. That's really interesting. Like the noticing that the coach is coming up as a motivator is part of the
right.
So like a tangible example is when I feel like bitching out on my last rep, and it's like, come on, pick up that fucking weight, do the last one. But recognizing, hey, where's this guy coming from is the
right,
like
exactly.
the meta of what you're talking about. It's like, whoa. So being in that moment, being aware, like, hey, where does that guy come from, would be the awareness part that you can develop. Right. Oh, that's cool. So
and we can go even a step further, noticing the thought, where is that guy coming from? And noticing the emotion behind it, which would be maybe one of curiosity, of interest. And I would go ahead and push of self-knowledge and self-love.
So is that
it becomes very granular after a while?
Right. So is that what you help coach? That's what. So this is what you do. All right. This is the whole exercise in a nutshell. All right. So then, but
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, why though? I mean, it's cool. It's kind of blowing my mind a little bit, but what are the benefits? Why would I decide, oh, I recognize that this is the coach that's motivating me to do that extra rep. I appreciate it. Cool. But if I didn't have that motivator, maybe I'd still do it anyways. Why would I want to develop something that is like a new skill with somebody like you? What's the point?
Well, I think self-knowledge comes to mind, right? Because for the most part, and this isn't true for everybody, but it's true for myself, I assume for you and a lot of people in our lives, our emotions and our thoughts run to a large extent. So if we have that observer of the adult self, we're able to slow things down and react in simply the wisest way that we can, right? So if you had an observer lens, let's say, you know, you had kind of like, you died, you know, tomorrow, and you could look at your whole life and be like, you know what, I would have changed that, because I feel like I reacted impulsively and it brought me into places that I didn't want to be. Maybe I got angry with somebody where I could have been kind. Maybe I didn't control my impulse when it came to this. So when you have kind of like that master observer self, and by no means am I kind of self, right? I'm working on these things, but when you have that kind of like master observer capability, then, you know, life becomes a tapestry and you can become the artist.
Dude, that's deep.
So it slows things down really truly, but you can notice all the types of impulses that you have, all the habit systems that you have, all the addictions, whether they're emotional, behavioral, like drugs or whatnot. And you can slowly shift them as you become aware of kind of like the impulse to pick up the phone. It's like, whoa, where did that come from? So I'm slowing it down and like, okay, I was bored. Right. Boredom is a big factor.
Right.
A lot of us are also, our lives are dictated by fear. Right. So fear of the unknown, fear of death, fear of not being enough. Those are the three biggest ones that come to mind. So, you know, a fear of pain. And so we try and avoid these things, but sometimes we don't do them in the wisest way. And when I say avoid, we have an aversion towards death, right? We have an aversion towards pain. So we do things to avoid it. But here's the true kicker. If you can befriend those fears, right? Just sit with them, and they will show up during meditation. If you can sit with it, then clarity of mind can come in those difficult circumstances, because we will all go through.
I like that, man. This is very similar to reading the Stoics, where you accept
Often,
death, right? Memento mori is like one of the catchphrases.
I've seen a lot of similarities between Buddhist philosophy and Stoic philosophy, and I think what they have in similarity is that clarity of thought, that sobriety of thought, so reason being a huge factor that makes us human. Whereas in our society and in many societies, following the heart is something that you should, do. Following our emotions is something that we should do, but the passions often control us. Right? So can we take a step back, notice the passion, and ask ourselves, is this what we want to engage in, or is there something wiser that we can do? So, yeah.
So that is something then that is trained, and therefore you can get a grip. So it's like to the one extreme, having grown up in a family where it's like, keep a grip of your emotions, which I read as don't get emotional, push everything down. If I understand what you're saying is, don't push everything down, understand where it's coming from. It's natural. You can't stop an emotion from happening, but then it's how do you react to that emotion based on training the meta-analysis of the emotion so that you're kind of in control.
Absolutely.
I got that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then
that's exactly it. Good job.
Okay. Thanks, man.
What comes to mind is you said train, right? So this is a tool, right? It isn't a religion. It's a tool based off of philosophy that was developed 2,500 years ago by Buddha, right? And the tool kind of shows up in this kind of like adage. It's like, do not follow your heart, train the heart.
Yeah, I like that. So therefore, that's where you come into play. A guy like myself, like, man, I'm just having a hard time. Like, it's just something not clicking. I'm erratic. I just need. So, on the tactically, what are you going to do? If I'm your, I don't know if I can say I'm your patient, but okay, in a hypothetical situation, right? Do I do a meditative practice? What do you have in your toolbox?
So what I do is I can do like short, minute or two meditations with my clients. Generally, when I do that, I do it to kind of like calm their mind and their body so that they can gain clarity in the moment. I teach a program called Mindfulness Training for Emotional Resilience, which is a 4-day, over 4 weeks program for emotional resilience. But it's a bit more psychoeducational, so for beginners, it's pretty cool. The first mindfulness program that was developed in North America by John Kabat-Zinn is called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. And so that's an 8-week program over 8 days, but I mean, it's 2 hours per day, so a total of 16 hours with a silent retreat. And in these kind of elongated programs, the individuals are taught to be independent. So you don't necessarily need a voice guiding you through meditation, because you technically would have all the tools to do so. So you can sit on your own, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes in the morning, in the evening, or whenever you want during lunchtime. Notice the thoughts that are coming up. Notice the emotions and the sensations that are coming up. And as you start to see a thought for a thought, an emotion for an emotion, and a bodily sensation for a bodily sensation, the emotional charge dissipates. And so what comes next? So for a lot of people that have anxiety or fear towards something, it could be a coworker, a loved one, their boss, or just a certain situation, if they can actually learn to sit with it, they'll see what's actually bothering them. And once they come to that knowledge, it shifts from a kind of like a contraction in the mind to kind of an openness in the mind. So finally you can kind of like breathe through that situation. Like right now I can see you're thinking, right? Your face is a bit contracted as well, because you're trying to process. Oh, once you've processed it, then there'll be a complete understanding of the body, and you'll be able to breathe.
Okay.
There's a lot of info.
That's interesting.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's really good. There's a lot of questions that come up from that.
Mm-hmm. Please go ahead.
I guess I'll go with the first question that came to mind was when you're talking about fears. You're fearful of something, and in a soldier capacity, in a soldier context, before, at least in my experience, before I deployed, there was fear, right? I'm going to war. I've never done that before. But outwardly, I'm good, cool as a cucumber, because that's just my demeanor. But I knew I had to do something to channel that fear, so I started writing. I didn't have anybody tell me to do it. I just naturally gravitated towards it. But internally, I knew there was something up, because when I went to the dentist, they're like, "Hey, you're grinding your teeth." I'm like, "Okay." And they said, "Well, do you have anything stressful coming up?" I'm like, nah. They're like, "Sure." Like that was. And then I said, "Well, I'm deploying in like 2 months." They're like, "What do you mean deploying?" I said, "Well, I'm going to Afghanistan." And they went, "Oh my God. Well, of course you're grinding your teeth." And I said, "Oh, so I'm not recognizing it during the day consciously, but subconsciously it's in there." So with doing something like what you're talking about here, allow the subconscious to kind of relax itself and just be able to be in the moment and actually challenge it head on, because it feels like I was just avoiding the actual thought of, fuck, I might die when I'm over there. It's just a thing. It's a very real possibility. But I was just like, no, I'm young. It's not going to happen to me. I'll write a little bit. Is that kind of where you can come in as an expert and deal with individuals that are maybe going off to war, like troops?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's very interesting, because that kind of like experience comes up quite a bit when I do meditate on fear of death, because it's quite salient, as an event, right, in one's life, and confronting that fear, right? And it's just a thought, which is very interesting. It's just, I might die, but the reaction that we have internally is quite potent, right? So we start believing. And so I guess just to answer your question a little bit more, there, especially in U.S. troops, from what I'm aware, there's a lot of research done on mindfulness practice, and there's varying types of meditation that they bring to the table as well, before and after troops deploy, so that troops can kind of manage their emotions as they're on tour. Mindfulness has been used. I'd have to look at the research. There's also a type of meditation called yoga nidra. For those that know yoga a little bit, it's done in shavasana. You don't move, you're on your back. And it's a relaxation meditation. That's the focus, is relaxing. So they've used that, and they've noticed that troops are more resilient and tend to react less quickly, or less unwisely, I should say, in difficult moments, and are able to process whatever traumas come up more quickly, because they're fully engaged with their own experience and not avoiding it or using what I'd see often as a sense of kind of like pride, or I'm tough, to kind of like, no, I'm bigger than this, right? And then it's showing up potentially 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years down the road in a relationship that they're having, right? Where, no, I'm tough, I can get through this, right? And it's like, oh, where did that come from?
That kind of attach it, or I shouldn't say attach itself, but it is complementary to guys like, I don't know if you know the work of Dave Grossman, who talks about the bulletproof mind, going into like a combat situation, armored with the idea that bad things are likely going to happen. So you need to get ahead of it. You need to make sure that you have that ability to cope ahead of time. So you need to do like hard things, but the mindfulness thing isn't part of what he talks about. So I like what he has to say about the bulletproof mind and being aware, but going a little bit further deeper and talk about the meta side of things of what are these emotions and why are they coming up. That's really cool. I mean, at scale, that would make a lot of sense because we don't do it as a society really anymore. It's not something that intuitively gets taught. I get the impression that a few generations ago, it might have just been something that maybe it was religion's, responsibility, and it was diffuse, right? It just happened. It was kind of like by osmosis. You would just get this understanding of how to deal with the emotions or think about the emotions. But it just seems like the way our society is built now, it's just to distract, don't worry about it, numb it, drink, smoke some weed, cool, don't worry about it. It just seems like we've adopted this type of avoidance. And I don't know because I don't know anything really about this topic, but maybe you could speak to it a little bit more. But the levels of anxiety seem to be just through the roof, depression's through the roof. It just seems like if we are able to just calm things down, think, and be a little bit more mindful, that would help.
Yeah, I think we're going a bit more into the psychological realm, but I think I can tie things together a little bit. Back in the day, I think we were a bit more anchored in just having a few things that we needed to do, right? Whether it was farming, taking care of the family. We didn't have that much information to deal with. Okay. So then fast forward as we're going through certain, religious revolutions, whether it be in, our home province, Quebec, Canada as well, the US, to a certain extent. The new religion, in a way, that's popping up is the internet, and how we're very much attached to it through even governmental means, right? You look at kids going to schools, and you have to have, it's called. Well, you need access to the internet,
tablet.
So then, so notice what happens, right? Our focus becomes electronics, or becomes the internet. That word focus. So now, but who controls the things? Yeah, tablets, cell phones, computers. It's corporations. Right? So now our focus is for sale. You've probably heard about that idea, right? So if we can keep the focus of this person on YouTube, on TikTok, whatever it is, even here, then
I recognize the irony.
Right, we win, right? But somebody that's wise and that's appreciating this would see this as it being so. But at the same time as the smartphone came into, I guess, power, I think it really came in around 2012, if I remember correctly.
2008 was the first iPhone. 2008 was the first iPhone, and then mass adoption by 2012. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So what they noticed was depression and anxiety levels were shooting through the roof at that point. So whatever that means, but at the same time, what we've started to see is the advent of mindfulness, of meditative practices, right? In order, I believe, to combat, this rise in anxiety and this unfocusing, or this, focus that's all over the place, right? Because so much knowledge is coming in, so it's draining, right? So how can we come back to kind of like a pure state, but not only a pure state, but a wise state, I would say. And that's what meditation allows us to do. Close the eyes, pay attention, notice who we are. And I think most wisdom can actually be found from there.
Yeah, I'd love to do a quick meditative exercise with you just after the point I wanted to make. You touched on the focus thing. My phone's over there actually, but I read somewhere, or I heard it in one of the podcasts, that a lot of times now you'll experience an emotional event. You might get into a fight with your wife. You might have a hard conversation with a colleague. Whatever it may be, we start now going towards a digital device as our first line of comfort, which has never happened in human history, right? Typically, you would either pull away and kind of shut down. Then the other type of personality would be find somebody to communicate your hurt with and act in a communal type sense. But at some point, you're going to reach out to another human being and talk about what's bothering you. But now the surrogate is your phone. And like what you just said, who controls their feed? Well, it's corporations. And what is that doing? I don't know, but I can hazard a guess. It's probably not very good. So I think that just to touch on what you were saying there, makes a lot of sense. That it's masking and providing just false comfort, and that whatever you're feeling is not actually going away. It's just being hidden for that time period, and you get some sort of relief, but ultimately you haven't gotten to the root of it, and then it just builds and builds and builds.
Yeah. And that's actually really interesting, right? The surrogate, who is the surrogate, right? Are we going to find the wisest information on the internet? Depends where you look.
If you're listening to the Hard to Kill podcast, probably.
Yeah. That was the next thing. And then we talk to therapists. Not all therapists are super wise, but if a therapist is doing their job, they're allowing the person to talk and gain personal clarity so that they can become their own surrogate.
Right.
Their sense of clarity, their stoic selves can come in and recognize that they have this, for lack of a better term, vulnerable or child side that's present due to a trauma. They're to say, oh, I'm hurt. Clarity side comes in and says, okay, we can deal with this. So, and then if we take it a step further, actually, let's take it a step back. Sometimes we don't get the best information from friends or parents or whatnot, because often they have a biased perspective and they want to help, right? They have this kind of like intention, I need to help this person. So they're not necessarily there for the person to develop their own sense of clarity. So, and then let's take it a step up. If we are a bit deeper in terms of, let's say, mindfulness, we can become our own coach, right? That fear, right, of jumping into the deep end. Okay, so what do you want to do about it, right? And then having that process happening internally, because we do have access to the most part. For the most part, we do have access to kind of that mental clarity. Prefrontal cortex, limbic system, right? How often are we using our limbic system or varying parts of our brain to engage with reality, right? Versus, using this part of our brain that's highly developed.
And just to clarify, the limbic system is what exactly?
Oh, we're talking about the mammalian brain. So everything that's kind of like centered in our head. So yeah, hypothalamus and I always forget the word, the other one.
Pituitary?
No. The pituitary gland is around there too, but one second. Yeah. You can cut this out if you want.
No, we're keeping it all in, man. We're keeping it all in. How dare you look at the internet?
Yeah. How do you know? Yeah. So notice what's coming up in your mind as I'm typing this in.
Pure stress.
On your part?
Yeah, no, I'm just joking. No, not pure stress at all. I'll get a producer.
Oh my god. Yeah, I always forget this word for some reason. Well,
what is it?
The amygdala.
Amygdala. Ah, yeah. Yeah, there's a book I read about this like monster that like needed to eat amygdalas, so you just like eat humans.
Well, that's interesting, right?
Eat their brains for their amygdala.
Our monsters are there in the amygdala. Our fear
right,
centers.
Exactly. That was the metaphor for the, and then they turned it into a pretty cool movie. It was like in the 90s. I can't remember. It's here on my bookshelf somewhere. I can't remember.
Cool.
Yeah. It was called like The Beast or something like that. It was something weird. But I like really like I enjoyed that book thoroughly in high school, and when it turned into a movie, and then I only recognized the symbolism when I was older because I understood kind of what that system was.
And then becoming that's
yeah. If I understand correctly, the amygdala is that area of the brain that's controlling things like fear, right? Where fear responses will just like, and that fight, flight, freeze is controlled in that area of the brain. And if that's always turned on, like if you're suffering with significant amounts of trauma, then and you can't resolve it, that part of your brain is just in control. So that means your prefrontal cortex can't reason, right? Like you can't like it's hard to have both things fired up at the same time. So what we used to do, right, with that box breathing and like kind of bringing yourself down and getting control of your breath was to get out of that, oh shit, I'm going to die mode, and say, okay, I can think, what do I need to do next mode, if I understand correctly.
That's correct. Yeah, 100%. You're on that that path of well, your understanding, and it's neural pathways, right? So the more we feed a certain aspect of our brain, often after trauma, the more we use it, right?
Yeah.
And the less we'll use other parts of our brain. So yeah, for me, I'm starting to see that there's definitely a lot of neuroscience that has to be done as to mindfulness and how we can engage with our fear centers from a clear, sober.
Cool. So can we do a meditative practice here on the show?
So I'll run you through something, and I'm just looking at the time, and we have about 10 minutes left. So let's make this 4 minutes, and then we can maybe shift to a conclusion. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's great, man.
All right. So I'd invite everybody to try this out. So you can do typically meditation sitting down, lying down, eventually in movement as well. But if you just want to check in as to the position of your feet, your knees, your hips. The hips being aligned with the spine, so the spine's in a dignified but relaxed position. The hands can be in the position that to be for now. Although you could have the palms facing down. Check in with your shoulders. Sometimes they're a bit more forward, so we like to open up the shoulders so that they're, again, aligned with the spine, and the chest is a bit open to life. And then check in with the head. Notice if your eyes are straight in center, or if they're tilted downwards, upwards, and try and have them straight in center so that the spine can correctly hold the head. When you're ready, you can gently close the eyes or just relax the eyelids. Notice that there's a body. And there's the body that is seated. Engage with them. But not thinking. Doing this for the next minute. Thoughts will occur. Maybe 100 times. As best as possible. Ready, coming back into noticing that there's a body, noticing how it feels like to be in that body. Gently noticing coming back into noticing that there's a body that's needed, what that feels like. And just noticing that there's a body that is seated. Noticing that that body is breathing. Gently open up the eyes into this Heart-to-Kill podcast.
That's cool, man.
How was that?
Much more relaxed.
Tell me something you noticed. Tell me something you noticed.
I'm going to tell you the thoughts that were going through my head, and what was it felt like a ping pong ball. Okay, so it started with
it felt like a ping pong ball. That's important, right? You can actually feel it sometimes. Go ahead.
Yeah, it felt like it was going to ping, like my thought would like go from one end of my brain to another. Mm-hmm. Like I was able to get the spatial perception of like where these thoughts were going. So I got a flash of a random post I did about a video of one of the guests during the 30-day challenge, and it was just a thought as to like, oh, did I post that on another platform as well? I was like, all right, and then I started thinking about a vacation I took with my family before my daughter was born to Sandbanks, and just like the IGA, like the grocery store that was there with my son. It was just and then after that, it like bounced to like the back of my brain, and I was thinking about Theron Fleury because the hockey player. So I've watched a video about him yesterday, and for whatever reason, that was like it had to pop up in my brain. Let
me ask something real quick, because I'm going to do what we call inquiry and mindfulness. Mm-hmm. Thanks for that awareness, first off. And did you notice some emotional aspects that were attached to those thoughts?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
The post it was fear, actually, because I have this fear that I'm not doing enough. That's one you brought up. Like,
Fear of not being
I was like, fuck.
We all have it, man. It's all good. Yeah.
You know, I'm like, shit. My business is going to fall apart. I didn't get that post out. So then there was with the other one was with my family, my kid. It was, again, the feeling of it was joyful in the sense that like it was a really good vacation, but it was also the I'm not going to experience that again. And and my thought was, did I appreciate it enough? Which is,
again, falling into
the
holding on for dear life, right? To me, it comes back to fear of death. It's like, am I experiencing everything that I need to experience, or am I just, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So the theme is fear, I guess. Fear and Flurry, I think it's just because I'm on the podcast. I want to get him on the podcast. I'm excited if I can get him on the podcast. There was excitement there.
Good.
And so the emotion kind of dissipated after that. I felt a bit calmer because I was at the end of my meditation. So, roller coaster, man, roller coaster, and that's something that I know that I have. The fear, right, is something that I try to work on regularly. Right, is just to be in the moment and try to identify, why do I have that fear? Why do I have that fear? Because I have successes. I'm doing all right. Things are okay. So why do I have that fear that creeps up? And so that's my
why do you have that fear? Why do you have that fear?
It's the fear, honestly. I can tell you right now. I can tell you right now, and for all the listeners, it's the fear of not being good enough. It's been from my entire life, and that's where I've finally recognized why I'm so driven to do stuff. It's always this fear that I'm not going to amount to anything, and that's a driving force for me. But it also holds me back. So it's finding how I can tap into that dark side so that it doesn't end up hindering me, but I can also use it to my benefit. Because I've accepted that I don't think I'll get rid of it.
Probably will. Right? Mm-hmm. And so, but I think you nailed it on the head, where it's like using it properly. It's like, welcome to being a human. Welcome to being a Dave. Right? Mm-hmm. Oh, I have this fear. Cool. How can I use it appropriately? Right? And so it's not controlling me. I'm controlling it.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, it's I got it. It was another podcast from a business influencer, Alex Hormozy, that talks about using your dark side. I liked it. I really identified with it, where if you have a quick temper, it's like, okay, kind of talk about what you're talking about here. You're going to get that fire. Don't beat yourself up over it. Use it. How does it shape what you're going to do productively? Like, how is it going to be constructive? And that, because I have that temper thing too, but I've been told and trained myself my whole life, don't let it get out of control. Don't let it go. But then what it does is it just causes me to shut down because it's too big of an emotion. And then I just go away so that I can kind of regulate myself. So that's why I like this kind of stuff. And that's why I appreciate you being on the podcast talking about it. So Laurier, I want to know, how does somebody reach out to you? Because I think what you're doing is really, really, really desperately needed, not only in our community, just in society in general. We need folks like you helping with your skill set. So what's the first point of contact that they can have with you so they can start learning a little bit more about you and then potentially working with you in the future?
So, I'm at the beginning of my business, so the whole thing isn't set up the way that I hope to have it set up. But the first point of contact, jump on the website, www.freshandrested.com. There's a tab that has several of my meditations if you just want to take a look at that. But you'll also have access to my email, so fresh and rested. And eventually, when it comes to social media stuff, which I don't know, not so looking forward to. Probably want to hire somebody that enjoys that type of stuff. I'll be a bit more visible out there.
Right on. Your work will speak volumes. That's infinitely more important than having a strong social media presence, just from experience.
Yeah.
So
That's the hope, right? Or organic stuff, just one person at a time, I think is the best.
right. And do you currently work with veterans? I mean, I don't think your business just is for veterans, but it's anybody that wants to come through your doors and work with you. But I'm
Yeah.
just curious, like for the listener out there who's like, yeah, I'm a veteran, I don't know, maybe should I work with them or not?
Oh, well, 17 years in the reserves and the tour with psychological operations. I'm not, the 22-year veteran in the reg force, but that doesn't change a thing whatsoever.
Nice.
Just, two humans talking and, getting to know each other. That's the essence of it.
Love it, man. I love it. You're doing a lot of good stuff out there, man. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I think we need a lot more of you. So one day, if you ever decide to start training others,
Okay.
I was just going to say training other guys. You went to the next. You went to the meta of that question.
Yeah,
repopulate the earth with more of you. Sure. Or you could start a training course and train other folks that want to do what you do. I think it's a really important part of the next phase of our cultural progression is going to be just getting comfortable with ourselves. We're going to have tons of machines and AI and stuff like that is going to be able to do a lot of the stuff that we normally do now. How are we going to deal with that? How are we going to get rid of the anxiety? How are we just going to be okay with being human? And I think you're on that path and doing great work. So, buddy, thanks so much for chatting on the podcast. I'd love to have you back on and we can chat a little bit more and talk about what you have on your radar and what you're seeing moving forward, man. So thanks again for spending some time here and sharing your knowledge with the listeners.
And shout outs to you, Dave. I mean, it takes guts, man, to do what you're doing. I'm always impressed by the path you took. Stems from fear or from pleasure as well and wanting to help out. So often there's a mix of motives, right?
Absolutely.
Looking forward to seeing you when I'm back from Argentina. So.
Yeah, my friend. Yeah, we haven't hung out in a while, man, for sure. So thanks again. And folks, don't forget, train hard, fight easy. See you on the next one. I hate t-shirts that get floppy in the arms after 10 washes. So that's why I created a bunch of t-shirts with high quality cotton just for you so that you can go to the gym and look fresh, sport some philosophy, and smash those PRs looking good. So you need to head to davemorrow.net/merch, grab yourself a hat, grab yourself a t-shirt, grab yourself a sweater, and support the cause today.